Lesson 24. Most people have had occasion sometimes to observe and reflect curiously upon their instinctive reactions to those with whom they are thrown in contact in the general course of affairs. Out of your own experience, you can probably piece together an odd pattern of likes and dislikes, threaded apparently at random amid the outer fringe of recent acquaintances who dangle ever about the edge of your expanding circle of friends. You are remotely aware of a singular process of selection from which these threads spring, a sudden shifting of shadows out of which they float as mysteriously as some wind-blown strand of a hidden web, but their definite origin is beyond your power to determine. Why are you unaccountably drawn by one individual the moment you set eyes on him, left totally indifferent by another, while a third will excite an instant hatred and repulsion no less distinct because it has not yet been crystallized through an introduction? The immediate impulse is to attribute such reactions to certain obvious traits in the one who is the object of them. You diligently comb out of his character the good or the bad elements, whichever your sentiment toward him impels you to seek, and throw them as a sop to your rational mind, saying, "I like him because he is intelligent," or "I dislike him because he is untruthful." Yet that is only a subterfuge, a clever reversal of logic to feed into your baffled reason and still its hungry clamor. You have met equally intelligent people whom you found repellent and encountered many a most engaging liar. It would be more honest to say, because I like him, I am disposed to admire his intellect, and because I dislike him I am quick to detect his every lapse from absolute accuracy. It is necessary to penetrate much deeper in order to discover the real source of your different prejudices. Beneath the stilted superficial self which each one parades before the conscious inspection of his fellows is another self, true author and prompter of his human role. That self functions on a plane beyond the level of your perception, unhampered by the limitations which bound your mortal sphere. There, behind the scenes, so to say, are formed the attitudes which your outer self enacts obediently on the stage of your mundane existence. You are aware only of sympathetic or conflicting thoughts, interests, tastes, physical attributes, etc., the pegs on which you hang your friendship or your enmity, but of that other silent meeting where two individualities, stripped of their clumsy human pretensions, stand face to face and sum up their relations on the spot, you have no knowledge. When you experience a peculiar feeling of completion in the presence of another individual, a sense of ease and restfulness that is at the same time pleasantly stimulating, it signifies that in the subtle chemistry of soul vibrations your respective natures have fused into a harmonious whole, blending like two concordant notes or colors. Both of you derive from your association something that you could not furnish from within yourselves, and each measures the strength of his attraction to the other by the margin of his gain. Inversely, a person whose society leaves you cold has nothing to invite mutual exchange, while one who arouses your antagonism from the start has qualities that clash violently with your own. Therefore, your predilections for or against those with whom you come in contact are not mere incidents, accidental happenings that have their beginning and their end in your present term of human life, but are a part of that eternal identity of yours on which are strung the countless sequence of incarnations through which you have achieved your unfoldment on this earth plane. A love felt now may strike its roots deep through 1,000 ages to tap an attraction born of your first encounter with that individual. Hatred may suck its sustenance from a quarrel conceived in the earliest dawn of human life. Whatever the initial reaction may have been, it was fostered throughout all subsequent meetings and carried on from one incarnation to another, becoming constantly stronger and perhaps erupting at last into violent expression. That is why there is usually combined with a sudden instinctive liking or dislike for Satnyon you have just met for the first time an elusive feeling of recognition, as if you had encountered him elsewhere but could not quite recollect the circumstances. You have brought over the memory of past experiences which, instead of remaining decently interred in your subconsciousness, emerge to prowl about the outskirts of your conscious self the moment contact with that individual is reestablished. Except in very rare instances, you can never discern the exact nature of that meeting, because you both wore entirely different personalities from the ones you wear now, but the flavor of it still clings in the sap of your being. The great lesson for you to learn, one of the most important for your quicker evolution, is to understand those inner promptings and take constructive advantage of them. If you feel attracted toward a certain individual, you know that your natural inclination coincides with the law of eternal harmony, or love. Promote the operation of that law through you by loving the individual to the best of your ability. Love being at the same time the law and its own fulfillment. By identifying yourself with it in that respect, you advance so much further towards the identity with it in all respects which must ultimately be achieved. On the other hand, if your first impression of another person is one of repulsion, take it as a warning that there is something radically wrong between you. The more you indulge that negative urge, the farther you slip back from the goal of positive development to which you aspire, and the greater the obstacle you erect in the path of your own progress. Mistakes never mend themselves of their own accord. They must be made right by deliberate action on your part before they will cease to obstruct your way. Therefore, face the situation boldly, with a firm determination to change it for the better. In this task, universal life energy is your invaluable helper. Actual liberation of all evil lies in its transmutation into all good, a feat accomplished most readily through the agency of that omnipotent force. Whenever you feel your negative emotions rising against another individual, promptly make the contact with the universal power and direct its friendly current to the seat of the discord both in yourself and in him. The basic activity of universal life energy being to harmonize, it will first give you the poise to withstand every unkind aggression, and will meanwhile dissolve the disharmony enveloping that act, thereby accomplishing the desired transmutation. However strongly you may feel impelled to retaliate in kind for some undeserved offense or antagonism, do not yield to that destructive impulse. Realize that it springs from the negative within you, which responds in this manner to the negative outside. Your course, instead of cultivating the evil parasite in your nature, is to blight and wither it under a purging flood of positive forces. Make every meeting with the other individual an occasion to rid yourself of some of that latent poison in your system by drenching it with the current of universal life energy. Thus you will not only equip yourself to handle more effectively the negative directed against you, but you will heal an open wound that has bled you mercilessly throughout many past incarnations. And finally, in the very process of benefiting yourself, you will make of an enemy a friend. The universal brotherhood of all things is a fundamental fact of eternal existence. Only perfect harmony prevails behind the myriad faulty manifestations which sprout forth into human perceptions, because the great law governing the entire universe is harmony itself. The purpose of mortal being is to correct those lapses from the original harmonious state in which this harmony consists, and to realize in its transitory expressions the harmony existing perpetually in basic fact. Until this is accomplished, the end mankind is created to attain will remain an end yet to be achieved, so it is to the interest of everyone to spend a little conscious and intelligent effort in promoting their own progress. Love your enemy seems a bleak and unprofitable precept from the limited point of view, but properly understood with relation to your real self it becomes your guiding star on the uncharted way of your evolution. It does not mean to wallow in a sentimental sympathy for another person's evil traits, condoning the wrong he does in the vain expectation of thus encouraging the good. Rather, it means to rise to the challenge of that negative and wage implacable war against it, but a war whose weapon is love for the positive qualities and whose strategy is the development of those qualities into vigorous expression. Such a love, clear-eyed and steadfast, recognizing the wrong only to sweep it more effectively from the path of right, will carry you as far on the way of your own unfoldment as it lifts the other individual from the abyss into which he has been drawn. One thing to be borne in mind is that love, like all things in our human state of consciousness, has its gradations. Those who stand nearest to us have a correspondingly greater claim on our affections than those who are further away. The ampler channel commands the larger flow. It is unnatural to do more for strangers or for enemies than for one's own friends. Endeavor to widen all channels, giving to each its due meed of attraction, but do not concentrate on the lesser at the expense of the more important. That would be a perversion of the law, destructive to equilibrium and harmony, carrying with it the penalty that every perversion ultimately does. Marriage today has broken out into one of the most acute problems which educators are called upon to solve. The unhappiness so long repressed under an iron crust of convention has erupted in an increasing avalanche of divorces. In this new era of sincerity and directness, people are no more willing to suffer the disharmony that mars their relations. Lacking a cure, they seek relief by cutting entirely the bond which has become a grief and an oppression to them. Yet the solution lies in a plain understanding of the causes behind that discord, an accurate perception of those basic flaws which have turned their promise of richest happiness into a canker of disillusionment. There are two main objects served by marriage, or the mating of two individuals of the opposing sex, one immediate and one, the dominant one, deferred. The immediate object is of course the continuation of the race, the propagation of the species, and is confined to the brief space of years during which the human mechanism is capable of performing that function. The other and foremost object, which emerges into evidence only gradually in the long run, is the more complete development of those two manifestly incomplete types of beings, men and women. The division into sexes is the physical reflection of a division that exists in the expression of soul qualities. The perfect soul ray is, to say, shorn of half its qualities in its passage through the human lens. Therefore, two individuals of the opposite sex are like the two halves of a sphere, both incomplete in themselves, but each possessing what the other needs for completion. Both have latent within them the elements which, when developed, would make them independent wholes, but those elements must be aroused to growth by a corresponding stimulus outside. The attraction between sexes on which marriage is based is simply the instinctive hunger of these forlorn halves for completion. A man, the embodiment of manifested male qualities, is conscious of a lack which can be supplied promptly only by a woman, the embodiment of manifested female qualities. Moreover, it must be the particular woman whose complement of expressed qualities fits in just where his own leaves off. He must find the half that exactly corresponds with his half, since only then will there be that equality out of which absolute mutual freedom, harmony, and happiness can come. If two individuals are properly mated, the expressed qualities in each stimulate the corresponding qualities latent in the other into growth and unfoldment. The man discovers that he is developing out of his inner self the very traits of character which he sought, with unconscious selfishness, to acquire all at once when he married the woman of his choice. She, on her side, finds that she is bringing out in her character the more positive traits she desired to obtain when she permitted herself to be chosen. In other words, the two halves which were first drawn and held together by the limited power of a rather selfish mutual attraction, subconsciously based on the personal gain each expected to derive from it, find themselves expanding slowly into two independent, individual and harmonious spheres, kept in perfect relation one with another by the unlimited power of universal attraction, of love, and thus fulfilling the very law which first brought them together. The reason so many modern marriages lapse into a mounting fever of unhappiness that culminates presently in a divorce is because, aside from the legal aspect of the union, there was really no union whatever. The two contracting parties, instead of listening to the inner voice of their higher selves, simply acted on the spur of momentary impulses or whims. Such a marriage, the direct outcome of a weakness of character which corrupts genuine freedom into license, is wholly devoid of any spark of love. At best, it is a passing infatuation, usually excited by some personal and physical attributes, and lasts only until the appetite appealed to has been sated. The victims of that ill-considered union discover, to their sorrow, that marriage has utterly dissolved instead of enhanced the attraction which brought them together. The mists of their intoxication vanish with the satisfaction of their cravings, and from the midst of the lifting vapors each looms forth into stark, unlovely focus before the eyes of the other, with all the faults hitherto obscured by the blinding thrill of desire now harshly accentuated by contrast. Naturally, once they come to their senses and find that they have actually nothing in common between them, the only rational thing to do is to part. But if they had understood and availed themselves of the real liberty of thought and action belonging to modern youth, there would be no separation, with all its devastating effects, because there would have been no marriage in the first place. Self-reliance, the right to see and judge and decide for themselves, is what the new generation has demanded and received. Until some of its members learn to appreciate and exercise that right, making use of their own power to discriminate for their own advantage, they will not be able to sift out the good and the bad either from other people's passions and emotions or from their own. They will be traitors to their own standard, discrediting the very movement under which they flourish and reaping the inevitable penalty of distress and unhappiness which weakness, by the laws of nature itself, always incurs. Marriage under those circumstances, far from being a constructive union of qualities, is simply a disaster. When you contemplate marriage, make sure that the prospective alliance has in it the elements of success, both for your own sake and for the sake of the one who will share the outcome, whether good or bad. Everyone has within their grasp the means to determine accurately just to what extent they are suited to each other and the probable trend that a prolonged intimate association will develop. You cannot do this through reason alone, which is too easily prejudiced by immediate wants and too often fallible, but through reason supported and directed by a power that is by nature infallible, your problem yields a ready solution. Universal life energy will invariably show you the true relation in which you stand with another individual. When you are with the one you consider choosing as a life companion, make the contact with that force, take the other person's hand in yours or place your hand on their shoulder, and watch what you feel as a result. If there is really an inner blending of qualities so that the strength of one supplements the strength of the other instead of clashing with it, you will warm up to the surge of clear confidence and energy which wells up within you. On the contrary, if you experience a sudden cooling of your fervor, a plunge from ecstatic heights down to a surprisingly placid level, where you become soberly aware of a sense of coldness and indifference towards the one who a moment before seemed everything to you, you may be sure that underneath the deceptive sparkle of surface emotions there exists nothing in common. Be warned by what universal life energy searches out in the depth of your being, and you will not make a mistake in the most important step in your life. Know beforehand whether joy and happiness, or sorrow and discord are waiting to be evolved from the mingling of your respective natures. Then wedlock will cease to be a tragic gamble, because you will have the definite assurance that a harmonious union of qualities actually exists to endorse the union of your human lives. In cases where marriage has already started fond dreams down to wreck and ruin, universal life energy is again the healing agent which can build those shattered fragments back into ultimate realization. Perhaps you find that the partner who, by human law, stands the closest of all mortal beings to you, is in fact still almost a total stranger to you. The presence of that individual is an intrusion and an irritation to you, accentuated by the very intimacy of your relations. Every word and act seems barbed with your own resentment, pricking you to constantly greater antagonism. To meet this situation, make the contact with universal life energy whenever you feel your anger rising, and turn its harmonizing current upon your own discordant emotions. Let it flood to the cause of the friction, whether an unkind attitude on the part of the other or an intolerant humor in yourself, and cure the open sore at its roots. Perseverance in this course will eventually wear away those conflicting angles of your respective natures from which disharmony comes, will heal the wounds and bruises they inflicted, and will re-erect in your lives the happiness you thought splintered beyond repair. The miracle that human beings, with all their intelligence, willpower, and reason, are helpless to achieve, is simply one of the natural functions of the great power of the universe. The second great duty which devolves upon those who enter into the married state, aside from self-improvement, is the improvement of the race. The instinctive motive woven in with the mating urge is the production of children. In nearly every other department of animate existence except his own, man has exercised all his intelligence and ingenuity to breed ever finer types, selecting and encouraging the good qualities and striving to eliminate the bad. Plants, animals, and birds bring forth their best under his ministrations and for his profit and pleasure. Yet humanity itself, though after all the most important part of creation, is left to propagate in the same casual and accidental manner, rambling slowly and aimlessly up the evolutionary path along which they boost lesser forms of life with the utmost enthusiasm. Recently, some important and warmly disputed steps have been made in the proper direction, introducing the first semblance of order into that haphazard process. But until science of being definitely uncovered the tremendous flux and flow of unseen causes from which the embodied soul mysteriously emerged, the one supreme and vital problem whose single solution embraces all the rest remained unanswered: the prenatal influence of parents on their children. The sort of child to be born to prospective parents is determined by them solely during the few moments of their physical union. Rarely has the unexampled significance of that act been perceived, and in consequence most children are merely incidental to the indulgence of an appetite. That is why the sons and daughters of the great seldom fulfill the expectations of their birth, while those of the obscure and humble often exceed theirs. Those luminous souls which blaze brightly in their passage through the human firmament are the fruit of at least one instant of perfect love, whether found in cottage or in palace, and as there are considerably more cottages than palaces in the world, that ratio is apt to be reflected in their respective contributions to the ranks of notables of the earth. During that physical union, the strongest physical, mental, and emotional vibrations, blended into one whole which represents exactly the combined attitude of both parents-to-be, are projected into space. Like attracts like, the soul whose vibrations are keyed to the corresponding pitch is drawn irresistibly, by the law of attraction, to the maternal vehicle for its incarnation. Conception takes place within the womb, and from then on the matter is irrevocably settled. The parents can take the most elaborate measures to develop the soul that has come in response to their call, but nothing they can do will ever exchange it for another more to their taste. All the strange vagaries of heredity have their explanation in this precise activity of soul selection. The attitude by which alone it is drawn may smack largely of the characteristics of the parents, and usually does, or may quite possibly partake of none of them. A child may be patterned on the general plan, both with respect to traits and physical appearances, of either, or it may show no trace of any common bond. Grandparents may crop into evidence, depending on the extent to which their influence was bred into the deciding attitude. But the basic factors are exclusively the attraction of similar characteristics and not biological transmission. The vital importance of those crucial moments, therefore, cannot be exaggerated. They should be approached only with the most exalted sense of their sacredness and sublime significance, a frank and fearless understanding of the new stream they are to open into the swirling tide of human life. Shall that stream drain the swampy grounds of baser passions and emotions, finding access only through the lowest and most unwholesome part of the parent's natures? If that is the sorry gate unlocked to it, yes. Shall it freshen and clarify the dubious ocean into which it pours, helping to lift the sluggish average rather than dragging it down? Unquestionably it will, if parents locate its source intelligently in the pure heights of their finer nature instead of blindly and ignorantly straining it through the corrupt valley bottoms. Realize that one of the greatest responsibilities human beings can incur is the introduction into this world of another soul. A man or woman who would gather in depraved and vicious alley sweepings as welcome additions to the family circle could not expect to blame anyone but themselves for a tragic lowering of the moral tone in consequence. Yet people constantly rate the dregs of their own natures for the additions they will make to the great family of mankind, and are pained and grieved at the results. The guilt lies exclusively with themselves, and when they have the courage to recognize and understand distinctly this scientific fact, they will take good care, not only for their own benefit, but for the good of the entire race, that they should open those highest channels alone in their natures through which only the more finely evolved souls can emerge into expression on this earth. The question may occur to you, what then will be the fate of those lesser evolved souls who will be deprived of the opportunity to work out their further evolution on this human plane? There is no need to worry about that. The great law of the universe sees to it that no individuality lacks the appropriate environment for its unfoldment, whether the plane is within the scope of our human perception or not. If the one short grade of earthly life is advanced a degree higher on the evolutionary scale, the grade behind it takes up the slack. It means simply that the less advanced souls will have to travel a bit further elsewhere before they qualify for promotion within the more elevated margin of human existence. Children already born under unfavorable conditions created by their parents are not doomed by that initial misfortune to a whole life of unhappiness or mediocrity. All face the same problem of evolution from a lower state of consciousness into a higher one, and none can skip any of the intervening stages. The only difference is that some start lower down than others, the level at which a soul enters into material manifestation being determined by the average level of the attitude maintained by the parents in summoning one. If they, through ignorance or weakness of character, have tapped a vent near the bottom of the scale, their penalty is in proportion to the degree of their indulgence. They have to bend further and pull harder to lift the individual up to the mark of their expectations. Yet by persistent and intelligent use of the forces and laws of nature, the evolutionary progress can be accelerated to an extent that will overcome almost any handicap. Make a sound knowledge and constant use of universal life energy, both through the star exercise and the mental contact, a fundamental part of the child's training. Also, whenever negative traits break into evidence, apply that force yourself. The result will be that under this continual bath of positive power the evil and disharmony will be transmuted as fast as it boils to the surface, the perverse causes from which it springs will be gradually eliminated out of the growing character. The foul film which dulls that budding consciousness will be washed away, and the whole unhealthy human vehicle made clean and perfect for the transmission of the true, perfect, and harmonious being expressing through it. Patience and perseverance are naturally required, but parents who are aware of their blame and their responsibility in the matter will not count such a penance too heavy for the splendid results that will ultimately be achieved. Exercises. The star exercise morning and evening, relaxation, silence, and the mental contact are to be continued as always, culminating in the new exercise for the week, known as unification. The import of unification is implied no less clearly in the name itself than in the simplicity of the exercise. Its whole object is to dissolve away whatever remaining shell of negative still persists to insulate you from complete union with the universal forces. To perform it, proceed as follows. After you have relaxed and made the contact with universal life energy, concentrate your mind on the perception of that force as a universal power outside of you, a shoreless ocean in whose midst you float. Then, through the process of visualization explained in Lesson 15, endeavor to realize your unity, your oneness, with that power. As ice melts in the water from which it is derived, so let your separate identity merge mentally and physically into a sense of complete union with the infinite ocean out of which you had your origin. Let the dividing line dwindle away, so that you are acutely conscious of the living waves of that force washing in endless sequence through every part of your being. The proper performance of the exercise will give you a stimulating sense of extraordinary power, confidence, and joy. The infinite force of universal harmony will vibrate throughout mind and body, just as the mighty power of a great organ is gathered behind one chord to which the theme is keyed. All the petty discords which snarl below the surface of ordinary existence will be swept aside before your conscious realization of your oneness with the great all and your perception of the universal brotherhood of man. As unification is the culminant point to which all previous exercises are erected, its success will be in proportion to your conscientious and systematic practice of all that has gone before. Details are thus swallowed in one simple process that binds them into a single coherent whole, but each of those details has been one graduated step in a definitely ordered progress that demands the equal development of all in order to realize the highest. Questions and answers to Lesson 24. 1. What is the explanation of sudden instinctive likes and dislikes for other individuals? Instinctive likes and dislikes for other individuals are prompted by the harmonious blending or conflict of soul vibrations between others and yourself. 2. Are they necessarily restricted to your present human existence? These likes and dislikes are not necessarily restricted to your present human existence, but may have had their origin in any one of countless previous incarnations in which you first met the individuals concerned. 3. What law is manifested through a liking for another individual? The law manifested through a liking for another individual is the law of attraction or love. 4. How can that law be observed toward one who arouses your hatred? That law can be observed toward one who arouses your hatred by using universal life energy to dispel your angry emotions and to help you perceive the good qualities in your enemy, and then by loving and encouraging those qualities into a growth that will soon expel the negative traits you resent. 5. Why are modern marriages so frequently unsuccessful? Modern marriages are so frequently unsuccessful because there has never been any real union of soul qualities back of them. 6. What are the two dominant natural motives behind marriage? The two dominant natural motives behind marriage are, primarily, the mutual development and unfoldment into complete expression of the individuals themselves, and secondly, the continuation of the race. 7. Why can they be realized only if two individuals are properly mated? They can be realized only if two individuals are properly mated, because the expressed qualities of each must constitute the stimulus which arouses to growth, the same qualities latent in the other. 8. How can universal life energy be used to discover the right mate? Universal life energy can be used to discover the right mate by contacting it, then placing your hand on the shoulder or hand of the one you contemplate choosing as a life partner and observing the reaction it will bring to your consciousness. If you feel a surge of increased power, confidence, and pleasure, your soul qualities blend satisfactorily, but if you are aware of a sudden coldness and indifference toward one you thought you loved, there is not that basic harmony so indispensable for constructive and happy association. 9. How can disharmony be eliminated from married life? Disharmony can be eliminated from married life by using universal life energy to balance and reconcile the conflicting angles of your respective natures. 10. What determines the kind of child that will be born to prospective parents? The kind of child that will be born to prospective parents is determined by the attitude of the parents, the traits of character most strongly represented during the few moments of their physical union. 11. Explain the importance of parents' attitude during the few moments of their physical union. The importance of parents' attitudes during the few moments of their physical union lies in the fact that the vibrations projected by them into space at that time attract a soul of a corresponding rate to be incarnated. Therefore, if those vibrations represent the best of the prospective parents' natures, a correspondingly evolved soul will respond, while if the lower side of their natures is represented, the soul attracted will be of the same low level of development. 12. How may bad characteristics of children be transmuted into good qualities? Bad characteristics of children may be transmuted into good qualities by teaching them how to contact universal life energy constantly in all their activities, and by directing that positive force into them yourself whenever they allow their negative traits to erupt into evidence.